Hello. I want us to have another important discussion in the area of community development, specifically focusing on theories. Today, we want to look at evolutionary theory of social change. In our discussion, we want to focus on three main areas. Number one, we want to look at some of the key assumptions, arguments, or propositions that have been put forward in this particular theory. The other issue that we want to look at is with regard to the proponents. That is, some of the scholars whose ideas have served as the building blocks of this theory. The last issue that we look at is some of the weaknesses or criticisms that have been cited about this theory. Welcome to this discussion. Let us have some preliminary observations about this theory. And I wish to observe that this theory is based on the understanding that societies gradually change from simple to a complex one over a period of time. And this theory was largely inspired by the work of a biologist called Charles Darwin, who lived between 1809 to 1882. And the theory is based on the works of certain scholars. They include French sociologists, namely Auguste Comte and Emile Durkheim, a British sociologist by the name Herbert Spencer, an American anthropologist by the name Lewis Henry Morgan. Collectively, these scholars considered social change as positive and beneficial to society. In other words, they observed that any change that occurs in society is designed to make the society progress and prosper, and not to digress or go down in terms of development. So these are some of the ideas that we are going to base our argument on. Let's now examine some of the key assumptions of the theory. Number one, the theory proposes that all societies evolved from simple beginnings and became more complex over time. In other words, the societies that we see today and the way they look complex, they were not like that. At some point in time, they were very simple. But over the years, they evolved and became complex. The theory also argues that changes that occur in societies are positive and beneficial to their members. In other words, every change that occurs in society is meant to improve members' fortunes and make their lives better. That is why they insist that all change that occur in society are positive and are beneficial to society. Of course, this is debatable. Number three, the theory also argues that change in society are necessary since they strengthen members, societal structures, and institutions. In other words, if you want society to be strong with regard to the social structures that exist in it and the institutions it has created over time, it is necessary for change to occur in society, because in doing so, they make members of society stronger and they make structures and institutions that are established by member society to help them in the achievement of their needs much better. The last argument or observation by this theory is that change is the only assured means or mechanism through which society can achieve higher levels of civilizations. In other words, if we wish to be somewhere as a society, it is the ideas of these guys or the argument that such progress, such higher levels of civilization that we desire in society is only possible if we promote and embrace change. So that if we fail to appreciate change, to embrace change, or if we oppose change, there's a likelihood that not much progress and civilization might occur in society. And therefore, these theorists believe that civilization is, rather social change, is a prerequisite for civilization and hence should be encouraged as much as possible. We now want to examine some of the ideas of the leading proponents of evolutionary theory. As I noted earlier, one of the proponents of this theory is Auguste Comte. Comte believed that humanity goes through three main stages of change. These are theological, metaphysical, and positive stages. When he talked about theological stage, he meant a stage in societal development in which phenomena is attributed to supernatural. In other words, whatever that happens in society is caused by certain powers that is beyond us. And therefore, the theoretical stage, he further perceived it to fall in three areas. One is what we call fetishism. Fetishism is a situation in which members of society believe in inanimate objects. For instance, if you look at the Kikuyu community, they highly value and dearly hold Mugumo tree. The same trend appears in other societies. It could be a non-living object or a living object. For instance, among the Hindu, they have so much regard for the cow to the extent that beef as a source of food is prohibited in many Hindu cultures. Other than fetishism, there's also the other stage was polytheism. Polytheism is the belief in many gods. It is at this stage of development, member society felt that or believed that everything had its own god. There is the god of rain, the god of sun, the god of happiness, the god of death, the god of sadness, and the god of other things. That is the stage that is also part of the theological stage. And then there's the duration that Auguste referred to as monotheism. Monotheism now is a belief in a single supreme God. This is where most of our present religious doctrines are rooted in. Then the second stage, as I mentioned earlier, was the metaphysical stage. At this stage, it is the belief in society that an abstract power or force guides and determines events in the world. In other words, whatever that happens in the world, there is a force that makes it work. So that if there is rain, there is a force that makes it possible to rain. If there is death, there's a force that causes death. If there is health, there's a force that is responsible to health. Those were the stage that Auguste Comte described as a metaphysical stage. Then the last stage is the positive stage, or the scientific stage, which, according to him, is a stage in societal development in which events and solutions to human problems are based purely on observation, experiment, as well as comparison. In other words, basically on scientific research. So that if, say, we have drought today, we don't want to blame drought in terms of God is punishing us. Presently, drought is being blamed on climate change. That is, we are not using environmental resources properly. In the process, the climate has changed. And this is what now scientists in modern times are attributing drought to. So a positive stage or scientific stage is a stage in human development in which science is seen as a solution to most of the problems that are faced by humanity. Emile Durkheim, is also another important proponent of this theory. Durkheim was also a sociologist by profession and a French by nationality. Durkheim believed that society developed from a traditional to modern society through four main stages. These are the tribal stage, the primitive stroke traditional stage, the modern stage, and then the post-modern stage. He observed that society changes slowly, and the process of change includes self-correction to problems and strains the social world. In other words, Emile Durkheim appreciated the fact that while change leads to progress, at times there can be certain problems that the process of change might encounter, or certain obstacles that might be on the way of social change. And he stated that anytime these problems appear, society was able to address them, build consensus, and then make society move forward. In other words, he recognizes that there is no change without obstacles. However, ability for society to move forward depended on its ability to address those obstacles. Again, he contended that where there are conflicts or disagreements among groups in society, in the process of change, they are corrected through evolutionary, not evolutionary forces. In other words, Durkheim emphasized the need for consensus. Members of society sitting down, discussing, and agreeing about the direction they would wish change to take. This was to be done through evolutionary, meaning through a gradual and peaceful process, not revolutionary, which we might interpret to mean not through violence. In other words, he advocated change that's achieved through consensus rather than through violence. Durkheim also views societies as changing in the direction of greater differentiation interdependence and formal control. In other words, as society moves forward in terms of change, there will be greater division of labor so that each parts of society are specialized in performing certain functions, and in doing so, they would, in the long run, society will, in the long run, benefit from the advantages of specialization. Again, he looked at society as also being interdependent. In other words, even as change takes place, according to Emil Durkheim, there was need for different parts of society to work together to achieve that particular change. Another important proponent of social change is the British sociologist called Herbert Spencer. And Spencer believed that societies progress through three main stages. These are simple, compound, and double compound stages. A simple society is generally one that is small in size, the one that has greater mobility, one that is fluid in structures, and also low in terms of division of labor or differentiation. In other words, when you talk of a simple society, you basically mean society that is small in size and one that does not settle in one particular place, because mobility enables them to satisfy their needs. In other words, it is not possible for them to settle in one particular place because that will not make them achieve their diverse needs. Compound societies are those that come as a result of the merger between several simple societies. And this merger, according to Herbert Spencer, could be through a peaceful merger where different societies agree to come together to form a bigger one, or it could be through a violent process. In other words, one simple society invades the other and then it absorbs it. So that a compound society is now characterized by permanent settlements, greater division of labor, as well as stable structures. In other words, once several simple societies have come together to form a compound society, it is the opinion of Herbert Spencer that now a society that is coming as a result of such merger will now have permanent settlements. They will now no longer be moving from one place to another often. There will also be greater division of labor, and also the structures they have will not be fluid, but rather stable. Then there is the double compound societies, and these are societies that either have resulted from, again, the merger of compound societies or the merger between compound societies and other simple societies, so that these societies are now completely settled. They are more integrated, they have strong social institutions, the family, the state, the economy, education, religion, media, health and medicine, sports, among other social institutions. Again, they also have very complex division of labor, so that societies that today we call as industrial societies might be seen in the analogy of the double compound societies. Then societies that we describe today as developing countries, they might be seen in the analogy of the compound societies. And then societies that are still unsettled, that are still in the hunting and gathering economy, we can now describe them in the understanding of Herbert Spencer as simple societies. Even though there is this this idea that societies progress from simple compound to double compound societies, and also the emergence of certain characteristics in each of these types of societies. Herbert Spencer cautions that the extent to which a society progresses depends on what he calls social self-consciousness. What does he mean by social self-consciousness? He means that this is the awareness that the well-being of each person is bound up with the well-being of all. In other words, Herbert Spencer is rejecting the idea of selfishness. According to him, you cannot have a society that progresses if a person does not perceive the other person as being important. And therefore, he's encouraging people to be a brother's keeper, so that once we are concerned that our progress depends on the progress of others, and therefore we promote each and every human being, that is when real progress can be attained. And this is what Herbert Spencer advocated for. The last proponent of this theory that we want to look at is an American anthropologist called Lewis Henry Morgan. And Morgan argued that societal development undergoes three main stages. These are the savage stage, barbarism stage, and then lastly, the stage of civilization. By savage, he meant the lower stage of development, which, according to him, was characterized by hunting and collection of plants for survival. Basically, the hunting and gathering societies. Then there is the barbarism stage, which, according to him, is the middle level or stage of development. And this begins when a society now starts domesticating animals and also start engaging in limited agriculture, that is, limited tillage of land for crop production, and also making pots and other simple items for domestic use. Then there is the final stage of development, according to Morgan, which is civilization. A civilization, according to him, is a high stage of human development, which begins with the invention of writing and climaxed with the full adoption of animal and crop husbandry, as well as the establishment of law and order institutions. In other words, this is a stage that, when we're looking at the history of economic development, we can call it the agrarian revolution or agrarian stage, where livestock keeping is going on as well as crop production. So that Morgan argues that human development is pegged on three stages. This theory has received certain criticisms from some quarters. And now I want us to turn to some of the criticisms that have been leveled against this theory. One of the critics have noted that this theory is or was designed to advance colonial interests, and they argue that the theory provided a convenient justification for colonial rule over the groups that the theory perceived or conceived as primitive. Colonialism, therefore, was seen or was promoted as a means of emancipating the colonized communities from the yoke of barbarism to the path of civilization. Critics, therefore, argue that early evolutionary doctrines were heavily used and accepted because they served the interests of the colonialists. Quite often, they argue that colonialists seized on the propositions that were used or that were put forward by these theorists to justify their colonial activities among the groups that these scholars considered as primitive. Indeed, a lot of anthropological studies by Western scholars in the 19th century formed the basis of colonization. Although not all these anthropologists subscribed to evolutionary theory, but to some extent, their ideas were seized on by colonialists as a justification for colonizing countries so that they can be freed from barbarism and then guided to the path of civilization. The theory has also been criticized for ignoring the fact that not all societies need to develop through a single or what was described as a unilinear path, that is, a single system of development. The critics argued that there are multiple paths development and not necessarily the one that is being advocated for by evolutionary theorists. They cite the examples of Bushmen of Southern Africa and the Aborigines of Australia, whom they say have been directly introduced to industrial society without necessarily going through the various stages and paths of development as proposed by evolutionary theorists. Critics therefore charge that emphasis on a unilinear path development was an attempt by these theorists to prescribe to societies to adopt a development path that was taken by the Western societies. They say that if at all Western societies had to achieve greater levels of development and civilization through a unilinear path, it is not that that is the same path that all societies will have to undergo. So it is felt that societies might adopt different paths. What matters is they reach the apex of civilization. And critics have also pointed out that the assumptions of the theory were grounded on faulty interpretations of data obtained from different cultures, which were then forced to fit into the various stages of evolution. This theory has also been accused of ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism refers to the tendency by some people to view their cultures and societies as superior and the standard by which other societies and cultures should be judged. Critics therefore observe that proponents of this theory were blind to the concept of cultural relativity and hence judged other cultures purely in terms of their own cultures or other cultural standards. The theory is therefore being accused of propagating ethnocentrism by considering Western cultures as being superior and standard and other cultures as being inferior. Therefore, any cultural activities that they found as being different from that of the Western cultures, the theorists perceived as inferior, which, according to critics, amounted to promotion of ethnocentrism. The theorists are also accused of concentrating only on one aspect of culture, that is technology, while ignoring other aspects of culture, such as norms and values, which non-Western societies were extremely strong at. Therefore, these theorists were being accused of bias in terms of looking at social change only in the context of technology, without making reference to strong norms, strong values that have kept some of the societies that the theorists considered as primitive intact, and therefore leading a fairly stable life, even though their lifestyles and practices were largely different from those of the Western cultures. I want to thank you for listening, and I want to ask you to forward any issue that you feel need further explanation, so that I may create time and respond to it appropriately. Thank you so much.